everyone, I'm Diana Novel with the Robotics Education and Competition Foundation.
And I'm Tyler McCrary with VEX Robotics.
Welcome to the 2024-2025 RECF Town Hall. This season is proving to be one of the most exciting in VEX history. Teams have shown that they're more than capable of rising to the challenges of both high stakes and rapid relay.
For sure. You can already see the winning strategies beginning to form as we move closer to the final showdown in the VEX Dome. We've got a lot to cover today, from VEX Worlds to Girl Power to your questions answered by Dan Mantz and Bailey Kahl. But first, let's take a look at some of our favorite highlights from last season.
What an incredible season. It's hard to believe that these games were only revealed a few months ago. We look forward to seeing on how your robot designs evolve between now and VEX Worlds.
Now let's hear from Bailey and Dan as they dive into this season's update.
Thank you, Tyler. I'm Dan Mantz with the REC Foundation, and I'm here with Bailey from VEX Robotics. Many in the community might not know Bailey, so before we start with the update, let's take a few minutes for Bailey to introduce himself.
Thanks, Dan. My name is Bailey. I'm a mechanical engineer here at VEX Robotics. My day job is working on the game design committee and designing the V5 and IQ VEX Robotics competition games.
We really appreciate all the great questions that you asked, and we're going to get to those later today. So first of all, the most asked question besides AP testing is usually information about VEX Worlds. So as most of you should know by now, the VEX Robotics World Championship for 2025 will take place May 6th through 14 in Dallas, Texas. And we will start with the VEX Robotics V5 Competition High School, then we'll go to the JRTC National Championship, the V5 Robotics Championship Middle School, as well as VEX U Robotics Championship, and then we'll conclude the event with the VEX IQ Robotics Championships for both middle school and elementary school. Now, we do have some changes for VEX Robotics this year that I need to talk about. This year, the REC Foundation will require all teams to book through Team Travel Source. Now, in the past couple years, we always gave you the option to work through Team Travel Source. Last year, for the first time, if you weren't booking through Team Travel Source, we had a survey asking you to explain why you couldn't. This year, we're actually going to have all teams book through Team Travel Source, and the reason is very simple. The REC Foundation receives a lot of rebates from the city of Dallas for the VEX Robotics World Championship. But those rebates are based on room nights and attendance. So room nights is pretty obvious. When you book through the block, the REC Foundation gets a credit for that room. And those rebates actually go back to the VEX Robotics teams. The REC Foundation doesn't save any of that money. We take 100% of those rebates and apply it to the cost of VEX Worlds. Well, last year we were really close to not earning those rebates. And that wasn't because of attendance, but it was because of so many teams booking rooms outside the block. So in order to make sure that we can get those rebates and keep the cost of VEX Worlds as low as possible, we are requiring that all teams book through Team Travel Source. Now, there are going to be some exceptions. So for example, if you reside within 50 miles of Dallas, you're going to be able to apply for an exemption to that. If there are other specific needs, again, please reach out through the process and we'll see if we can grant you an exception. Probably what's going to be different this year, though, is if you're booking a hotel, say in Fort Worth or Irving, that's where we're going to require you to book a Dallas-based hotel. As part of this, we have increased the variety of blocks of rooms that we're offering. We made sure that we had many affordable options that include breakfast, parking, or internet. So you're going to see a lot more choices based on this change. Again, we want to make sure that the benefits we get from the city of Dallas are passed on to all teams, and we think this is the most fair and equitable way to do that. As I said earlier, the two biggest questions that I'm usually asked have to do with VEX Worlds and also the AP testing conflicts that often occur with VEX Worlds. We do understand that AP testing taking place during VEX Worlds is a hardship for many, many teams. And I assure you that we've worked very, very hard to avoid those conflicts where we can. I don't want to make excuses about the global pandemic, but last year and this year were particularly as a result of that. So when we originally booked our dates in Dallas, we did not have conflicts with AP testing. But as part of extending the dates with Dallas because of canceled VEX Worlds, we only had availability in May. What does that do for you as a student? Well, first of all, we tried to select the high school timing to minimize the impact on AP testing. And we did a survey, and we thought about having high school during the weekend, but many, many parents and coaches came back and said that travel time and study time on the weekend was more important because AP testing does offer makeup dates. So we ended up keeping the AP testing the first 3 days of VEX Worlds because the feedback we got from over 65% of the community is that their schools would work with them to schedule makeup dates. So that is one of the reasons we went in that direction. The other thing is we did try to make sure that we didn't conflict with the STEM-oriented AP tests as well, right? So we're not saying that students aren't taking the AP history or other things, but we did try to not conflict with the calc and pre-calc and some of those tests as well. For the IB students that also have a conflict, I understand there are no makeup dates in the IB program, but the beauty is you can work with schools in the Dallas area for alternative testing sites. So we highly encourage you to reach out to Dallas schools and see if you can find a location to take your IB testing. We also know for the first time this year that AICE testing coincides with some days of the 2025 VEX Robotics World Championship. Fortunately, AICE tests do offer makeup dates in the fall, so we ask you to work with your guidance counselor to get those makeup dates scheduled. Finally, if you have any questions on all this information, please reach out to support@recf.org and we will work with you to the best of our ability. Now, the good news is starting in 2026, we will not have conflicts with IB testing, AP testing, or AICE testing. Again, we do apologize for the inconvenience. It's just we really didn't have any options for April testing, neither in 2024 or 2025. Many of our sponsors are moving their funding to other programs. So the great news is there are many grant opportunities for those who qualify. Again, our sponsors and donors understand that we need more students in our programs, that more students need an opportunity for a STEM career or workforce development, and they have provided lots of great opportunities for students to get equipment, have their registration fees covered, or even get stipends for their coaches and educators. So please go to the REC Foundation website and look at those grant opportunities. Many teams participate on online challenges. And if you haven't, I really encourage you to do so. It's a unique aspect that the REC Foundation provides that many other organizations don't. The online challenges were opened up just a few weeks ago, and please remember that the submissions will open on November 6th and they'll go through January 29th, 2025. That's right, we are closing it down on January 29, 2025. I've been at the REC Foundation for almost 8 years, and every year we get a lot of phone calls saying, can you open it up just for one more day? Well, please understand that closing date is January 29th. We've actually added new online challenges this year. For example, the REC Foundation and VEX Robotics have partnered on a marketing online challenge, which I think is really, really neat. We also have online challenges focused on drones and other workforce opportunities. So please check it out. I bet you there's a good match for you and your team. I also want to give an update on awards. Now, for detailed information on awards, go to recf.org or vexrobotics.com and go to the game manual. That's where it has all the detailed information. But over the past 2 years, the REC Foundation has been asked a lot about making our competitions really reward innovation and creativity. So one specific award I do want to highlight this year is the changes we've made to the Innovate Award. We've updated the criteria to encourage students to create truly unique robotic designs. So again, we started this last year and we got very, very positive feedback. So that is the one award that I really want the students out there to pay attention to. Please go look up the Innovative Award, and we are going to reward those teams that actually have an innovative and creative design. And that rolls up to the Design Award and the Overall Excellence Award. So those teams that put time and the effort into creative designs are going to have a much easier path to qualify for both your state and regional championships and the 2025 VEX Robotics World Championship. VEXU. Now, I will say that I actually love the VEXU program, and I know Bailey does too, and we have a lot of questions coming up about the VEXU robotics competition. We actually, really want to encourage students that have graduated in our program to check out the VEXU robotics competition. While it uses the same rules as the VEX V5 robotics competition, it also allows participants to have greater flexibility in their robotic designs by having unlimited motors, 3D printing on machine parts. All that is legal in the VEXU robotics competition. So for you that are students that are in high school and are considering your next steps, whether it's a university career or something else, consider if your school has a VEXU program, and if they don't, consider starting one. And for those students that graduated from our program, again, I highly encourage you to look at your university and either participate or start a team. Last year we had a record number of VEXU robotics teams, and this year I'm excited that we'll probably be over 300. And if you do qualify for the VEXU Robotics Championship, make sure you do check out a VEXU competition at VEX Worlds. They're absolutely incredible.
Before we get to maybe the most fun session of the day, we're going to toss this back to Tyler and Diana before we get to our Q&As.
Thanks, guys. We're super excited about the new updates for Worlds in 2025. Coming up, we'll be back for Bailey and Dan to answer some questions submitted by the VEX community.
But before that, do you know about Pits and Parts? It's the REC Foundation's collaboration with Tyler from Fun Robotics Network. Check out this interview with Team 4610C, Ben C Channel, and 2509A Blue Wave Elite after their fantastic win at Highlander Summit.
Everybody's Tyler here with the champions of the Highlander Signature Summit 4610C and 2509A. I'm here with Declan and Brad. We're going to be talking about this huge win so far. Declan, I got to ask you, you were at the Mall of America event, didn't make playoffs for this well too. Now you're champions here and going to the World Championship. How's it feeling for you?
It's feeling great. I'm really excited to win. It was a really, really tough match. We were very close in some areas, but we ended up pulling up and we won. So,
what was your biggest improvement from MOA coming into here?
I think our wall stakes at MOA, we didn't even score a single disc on wall stakes, but we switched to a new design, really emphasized high rate of speed and really easy to score and really far reach, and we were able to score a lot of discs.
And why, looking at playoffs, why was Blue Wave such a great choice for your Lions?
Because we looked at their matches and they had really consistent autos and they knew how to hold corner. And so while we were scoring, they held corner really, really well, and it worked really well.
Brad, I want to ask you about coming into playoff matches here. What was your line strategy coming in? Your team just absolutely just rising up all the way through every single match. What was the general strategy for you?
I mean, the general strategy was to focus on positive corners, and also because we have a really strong neutral stake, we could take advantage of that and get the top rings by scoring onto the neutral stake.
Going through a round of 16 all the way up into the finals, did that strategy really change at all for you depending on who you're playing, or was it pretty consistent for you?
It was pretty consistent. We just went for positive corners, defended them, and if we had the chance, we could go get a neutral stick every so often.
In your opinion, why did your two teams work together so well?
I mean, because auto, we won all the autos in every match, and auto is like a main determining factor for like which team wins. So I think that was the biggest thing that worked well for both of us.
Yeah, looking at finals, right? Taking autos pretty much every time. Now, unfortunately, finals 1 had that DQ on that. How did you approach finals 1 going into finals 2? Like, obviously, it's not a great feeling right away, but how did you just carry yourselves and continue your success all the way through into finals 2?
Well, we knew that if it wasn't the DQ, we would have won the first match anyway, and so we were like, we can beat them. We know that if we do the same strategy that we did, where we get the 3 mogos really quickly, then we're able to just outscore them, and that's what we end up doing.
I want to ask you about Finals 3 as well, too. You know, obviously you got that momentum going in. Did anything change it for you in Finals 3?
No, we really stuck to the same strategy of getting the 2 mogos first and then getting the 3rd mogo, and doing neutral stakes if we can.
So last year you qualified for your state championship, right? Didn't quite make it to the Worlds. Now you're going to the Worlds this year. How are you feeling after this?
I mean, it's really amazing because this is actually our first award of like ever for our team. So it's so great that it's the ticket to the World Championship.
Well, best of luck to you. We'll see you at Worlds. This once again is your champions of the Highlander Signature Summit event. Congratulations, everybody. This video on fun is brought to you by viewers like you and also in partnership with the following. The Robotics Education and Competition Foundation provides fantastic programs for students from elementary school all the way through college. These include VEX, aerial drone competition, online challenges, JROTC, girl-powered, scholarships, certifications, and so much more. To discover these exciting opportunities, visit recf.org and get connected.
All right, now the fun part of this program, and that's the Q&A. I know Bailey's looking forward to it as well. We tried something different this year. We actually, through the REC Foundation Discord channel, we actually asked the community to submit questions as well as through our traditional. And I think we got a lot of questions that we've been asked before, but we also got some unique spins as well. So for the remainder of this, this town hall, Bailey and I are going to go back and forth and try to answer your questions to the best of our ability. So Bailey, welcome to the spotlight.
I'm excited to be here, Dan.
Yeah, so I'm glad that most of the hard questions are VEX oriented and not RECF oriented. So, but I know as you as a longtime member of the GDC, I know that you'll be able to provide some good insight to the community.
Oh, don't worry, Dan. I'll throw you some hard balls too.
Uh-oh. That's like, redo. Okay. So I think the first couple questions are actually for me. So you want to get us started?
Sure. This first question, Dan, we've got from Alex on team 2145Z. And the question, Dan, it's a good question. I'm really excited to ask you.
Uh-oh.
Dan, what do you like for breakfast?
What do I like for breakfast? Well, I'm going to say it's not Reese's Peanut Butter Cups. For those students out there, those are only snacks. They're not good breakfast food. I unfortunately don't eat a lot of breakfast, although I do drink coffee in the morning. But for me, the perfect breakfast would be eggs with bacon and sausage and good country fried potatoes. That's what gives me energy in the morning.
I couldn't agree more. Any breakfast leading with eggs and bacon is a good breakfast in my mind.
Yeah, but here's a good one for you.
Okay.
Wyatt from 5735H, he says, with regards to climbing and SG9, it says that you can't remove the opposing robots from the ladder. My question is, how far does this go? And then he gives some examples. But why don't you just talk in general about the SG9 rule?
Sure. This is actually a question we got in our robotevents.com Q&A recently. A similar question, at least. And why I'd encourage you to go check out the Q&A. You're going to get a better answer there than I could provide over the video, of course. And the other important thing I want to talk about is when we're answering questions like this, it's always important to refer to the game manual or to the Q&A as opposed to a video like this. This is going to be purely a supplementary document towards the game manual or things like that. There's a disclaimer at the beginning of the game manual that says it's the only official document that can answer questions like this. So unfortunately, I'm actually not going to be able to give you a binding answer to this, but I definitely can if you head on over to robotevents.com and ask us on the Q&A.
That's great. And that, remember, robotevents.com is always your friend. So here's another climbing related question from Adam from 3988A. He says climbing this year has been heavily nerfed with the height restriction rules. Is GDC considering any changes to possibly incentivize higher hangs? The first thing I have to say that is the use of the word nerfed. So I think that's new. I think I've been doing town halls. This is my 8th one, and the first time I've heard the word nerfed. But is GDC considering any changes, Bailey?
Sure. Scoring specifically is one thing we always monitor throughout a game's life cycle. And a couple of the other videos recently I've done with some of our coaching summits and the EP summits, we've talked about a little bit of how the GDC goes about the process of related to determining scoring changes and things like that. In the current state of the game, we've talked about this as a GDC multiple times. Our current feeling is that we're still in the somewhat early to mid part of the season. And if you look at some of the past seasons, the game's evolved so much beyond where we're at the current point in the season. And we feel that we don't actually have enough information from events. And as the season progresses, we feel we'll be able to get more information to potentially make a change like that later in the year. As it currently sits, we're pretty happy with the way the scoring is working out. Some of the early season events, like the Minnesota signature event, for example, that was really educational for us. We watched almost every single match from that event, really took in a lot of the information that was being presented by the teams and how they were building their robots, the strategies they were employing. We used that to make a couple determining changes at the more recent manual updates. But specifically to climbing, we're pretty happy with where it's at now, but it's definitely something we're going to be re-examining later in the season once we get to the ERCs and towards Vex Worlds.
Yeah, that's a great answer, Bailey. And again, I've been here for 8 years now, and I know early in the season, a lot of teams get really excited saying this should be scored differently, but GDC does have a plan, and often they know as the design evolves over the course of the season, because remember, at the REC Foundation and Vex Robotics, the engineering design process is what drives this all.
Absolutely.
That we know that other strategies will emerge and it will make the scoring make sense. The next question is from Jahan from 1629X. Actually, the next few questions are. So this question is, how does the GDC go about designing games? More specifically, where does the GDC get the inspiration from different games? What's the process behind this? And then he also asked, will there ever be any games based on sports? I know that the design process for a game is much involved, and you've been doing this for a while now, so I'm anxious to hear your answer.
Yeah, it's a really involved answer, but I think at the roots of the answer, we can break this down to exactly what you just said before. We follow the same engineering design process when we're designing games that you as students are using when you're designing your robots. We sit down early in our cycle. We come up with a really long list of brainstormed ideas. Inside of that brainstormed ideas, we also develop criteria and constraints that we want the game to fit inside of. We mold those brainstormed ideas into more refined ideas using these criteria and constraints. We prototype ideas out. We run some testing. We'll play some mock games, things like that. We have interns develop robots to test out games to see if this is going to work or if that's not going to work. Again, it's very similar to the same way you guys design your robots. Come up with the ideas, test the ideas, and roll with the one that works the best.
So do you have any plans to have more games around sports themes?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a theme that comes up a lot in our brainstorming sessions every year. If you look back to Spin Up, I'm sure you can imagine we talked about Ultimate Frisbee a lot in those couple of days. So it's definitely something that comes up a lot. Sports themes, especially for me, I'm a big sports fan. It hits home for me. So I definitely think it's something that we can look out for in the future, but obviously I can't commit to anything too hard.
You know, it's interesting. You may not know this, Bailey, but the REC Foundation had an event at the Arizona Diamondbacks in Phoenix that was sponsored by Honeywell. And the three organizations worked together for a baseball-themed activity. So, hey, maybe someday we'll have home run challenge. You never know, right? So, any questions for me?
I think we've got a question for you, Dan.
Okay.
This one's going to be from Uvu from 7121B.
Okay.
Why does the RECF pretend 3D printing is more expensive than buying $300 worth of parts for every robot?
Well, I have to say, Uvu, that's a different way to ask why doesn't the REC Foundation allow 3D printing. So I'm tempted to just find last year's video and give my answer, but We do not pretend that 3D printing is more expensive than buying VEX Robotics parts. What the REC Foundation believes is one of the great things about the VEX Robotics competition is that everybody has a level playing field. Now, I'm not naive. I do know if you have bigger budgets, you can buy more parts and maybe do more prototyping. But fundamentally, we do understand at the REC Foundation and VEX Robotics that most, if not all, schools have 3D printers. We do understand that. But that doesn't make it equal for everybody. So, for example, we have programs that only practice 1 day a week, and they don't have access to those 3D printers. We have other programs that may practice more often, but they don't have the fundings for the filaments and stuff like that. So if we allowed 3D printing in our program, we'd be introducing a level of inequality that we really don't want to go with. So again, as I said last year, and I've said the previous year, we don't say that 3D printing is illegal. You can 3D print cosmetic parts, for example. There are many people out there on Discord and at the VEX forum and other places that show how you can 3D print toolboxes, for example. So there's a lot of opportunities to use 3D printing as part of your program. But frankly, myself, I don't want someone 3D printing a gear that may explode in the middle of a match, right? And, I never say never, but right now we feel that the rules that we have, which significantly reduces 3D printing from a technical level, is the best way for our programs to continue to remain equitable and available and have a level playing field for all students.
All right, Dan, ready for your next question?
I am. Bring it on.
This one's coming from Afnan on Mason 1. Dan, are there any exciting things in the works for VEX Worlds that VEXU competitors specifically can look forward to enhance their experience? He's asking specifically about things like career fairs, social events, breakout sessions, networking sessions, speakers, things like that.
That is a great question, and it's good to hear from you. It was always wonderful talking to you at events, so I hope your career is going well. Personal shout out there. But there are some things in the works. So we're actually working with a returning sponsor, someone who used to sponsor the REC Foundation VEX Robotics programs in the past. They actually left for a couple years, but they're coming back, and they actually want to do many of the things that you're saying. They want to have job fairs. They want to introduce VEX Robotics alumni into internships and co-ops and stuff like that. So those are things that may not be available for VEX Worlds in 2025, but they're definitely in the pipeline. I would also say that the Advanced Robotics and Manufacturing Institute, ARM, they are a partner with the REC Foundation. They were at VEX Worlds last year, and they're actually sponsoring one of the online challenges. Their roboticscareer.org has added a question about robotics competition experience. So they are also targeting high school seniors and university students to participate in that program, and that will actually match you up with either an internship or more likely an employer for students that have come for our programs. So we do realize in some ways that the VEXU robotics competition has been underutilized. And we're going to be working really, really hard to expand that it's more than just a robotics competition, but it's a community initiative to both give back to the high school, middle school, elementary programs, but also to make sure that the alumni in these programs have the best job opportunities out there. So basically, stay tuned.
That's awesome, Dan. I'm very much looking forward to that.
Very good.
One more question from Afnan here. This one's going to be a bit more of a fun one. When you walk out on stage at VEX Worlds, if you had to pick your walkout song, what would it be?
Ooh, that's a difficult question for DJ Dan. I like so many different kinds of music. The one that popped to my head would be "Eye of the Tiger." There's just something about that song. Dun, 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 dun. That's always really, really inspired me. I would say, again, I'm showing my age here, probably also "Don't Stop Believing" by Journey.
Oh, yeah.
And because it's a great song that everybody knows, but the one thing I really try to do is inspire students to not stop believing in what their capabilities are. So right now I'd pick one of those two, although I will also tell the community that I love Green Day, I love The Killers, heck, I'll even listen to Taylor Swift. But I would say "Eye of the Tiger."
That's a great choice. Great choice.
Yeah. Well, that was a really fun question. So Bailey, what would your walkout song be?
If I had to pick one song, I think it would be Seven Nation Army.
Oh my goodness, by the White Stripes.
Yes,
right?
absolutely, yeah.
That's a great song. So as someone who lived in Michigan for almost 30 years of my life, big fan of the White Stripes and that song. So that's perfect.
I think it'll get the room real hyped up.
So to the Vex Worlds production crew out there, so when Bailey's coming out next year, we know what we want, and we'll have to ask Tyler what his song will be too.
That's a good question. So. We'll have to get that from him.
Excellent. So those are fun questions. Back to serious stuff. Dylan from WPI wants to know if there's any chance that VexU can get custom motor cartridges and COTS belts legalized again.
Sure. Specifically, talking about COTS belts first, this is definitely something we might be able to look at in the off season, of course. Specifically related to VexU material usage, it's something we're always looking at, seeing how we can improve, seeing if there's anything that we might be able to add to the allowances that'll make it easier to build robots. But motor cartridges specifically, unfortunately, that's not something we're going to be able to make legal again. This is specifically from an engineering perspective from Vex. The motors were never designed to be used without the cartridges installed. The loads that the motor itself sees without that cartridge inside, unfortunately, it can cause potential damage to the motor, and that's not something we want our customers to experience. So cartridges are going to be required to be used in V5 motors moving forward, and that's just for a quality of life reasons moving forward for both the customer perspective and for us, so that we don't have to support the non-designed use cases that our customers are using the motors in.
Bailey, I appreciate that answer. You know, the community out there, we get asked about COTS parts and 3D printing and stuff like that. It's not always about the equity of the program. Sometimes it's about safety too. And when I say safety, not just the safety of the drivers, the program participants, but like also a warranty safety, right? You invest a lot of your dollars into the Vex Robotics parts, and all of a sudden you start customizing something and that part fails. You know, it's detrimental to your team and your team's budget. I mean, the engineers at Vex Robotics spend a lot of time to assure that these parts work, and that comes with some design constraints, and that's why we're not allowing you options in many of these parts. So good answer, good question, by the way, as well. Any more questions for me?
Yeah, Dan. We're going to jump to Zoe here from RIT. What are the learning goals of VexU Robotics competition students being allowed custom parts? Is the goal to learn the intricacies of machine work? Is it to learn the process of ideating, designing, and creating a custom part as an innovative solution? I believe the question's basically asking, why are we severely limiting the students as far as them being the ones that have to machine the parts themselves? They can't just design the part and send it off to a third-party service to have it made elsewhere.
Yeah, you know, that is actually a really good question, and I do remember that conversation a couple years ago. This is almost a GDC question. So Bailey, I think that from a GDC perspective, you know, why are we requiring the VexU teams to manufacture the part themselves?
Sure. I think some of this comes back to what you had talked about before, understanding the equity part of our competition and making sure that everyone is operating under at least as close to a level playing field as we can get towards. When we started looking at this rule and talking to some students on VexU teams and things like that, many of the students expressed the frustration that their schools have machine shops, have all of these resources, but they're not immediately readily available to every student at the institution. So unfortunately, it's just a situation very similar in many ways to 3D printing. In just because somebody has access to it doesn't mean everybody has access to it. And in the current bounds of the VexU robotics competition, trying to keep that level playing field and equity at the forefront of what we're trying to do, unfortunately, creating this rule and sticking to it in the immediate term is the best way forward, we think.
Yeah, thanks, Bailey. That answer really resonates with me. That makes sense to me, and I hope that Zoe, that answers the question adequately for you as well. This is from Rowan from 593C. He did, interesting, I've never would have expected this question, but he's curious how the triangle PVC pipes are manufactured for the ladder.
Sure. It's an interesting question, and I love getting questions like this. It means the students are really diving into how the field's manufactured too. That's a really, really awesome idea and question to have. Rowan, to specifically answer your question, the PVC pipes, the triangular ones on the ladder this year, they're extruded PVC pipes the same way a circular PVC pipe would be made. Basically, you're just forcing a bunch of really hot plastic through a die that is the shape of the final part of the plastic. When that hot plastic gets pushed through that and then cools back down, it forms the shape of that triangular beam.
Very good. I didn't know that. I learned something new today.
And then, Dan, this question's for you, but it's from Rowan as well. What is your favorite VEX event to go to other than VEX Worlds?
Wow, that is a great question. If you asked me this in 5 minutes or 15 minutes or tomorrow, I'm sure my answers would be different. I will say that I really like the VEX AI competitions, VEX AI robotics competitions. They're in their infancy, and it's neat to see something starting from the ground up. I also like going to VEX Go competitions, even though they're not something that we promote a lot. The VEX Go robotics competitions that are done at a classroom or school district level, they're really fun because you're seeing second and third graders. But probably my true answer to that question is the girl-powered events that occur every summer in California. Those workshops are incredible. Over the course of 2 weekends, we reach over 800 new girls that have never participated in robotics. And then I also love signature events too. The quality of play is amazing, but also the experiences are really good. So that's kind of a non-answer, but I like all the programs that we do, but I do really like signature events, VEX Go and girl-powered events.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So Rowan has a couple more questions. He asks, what is the process behind creating updates to the game? And I know that process has evolved over the years, so this is actually a really interesting question.
Yeah, Dan, this is a question that we've gotten a bunch in the past couple of months, and I've talked about it in a few of the presentations I gave at our Coaches Summit and the EP Summit as well. One of the things that the GDC looks at when we're determining any decision related to games, whether it be an update or a simple scoring change, or really any decision when we're developing a game, it all comes back to how do somebody from 4 main stakeholders, 4 different groups that we directly impact, how does a decision directly impact them in either a positive or a negative way? Those 4 stakeholders are the referees, the event partners, the coaches, and the students on the teams. These 4 stakeholders are all going to have very different receptions or opinions on any decision that we make, so we have to balance all of these decisions to positively influence somebody while not negatively influencing another group. It's a tightrope act in many cases. And for example, one of these updates that you may have found recently was the corner update that we made to high stakes this year. We rearranged the tape lines on the field and the definition of the corner. This was driven almost entirely by our head refereeing crew that was at some of the early events that were having some trouble with scoring matches, determining which mobile goal of 2 was actually placed in a corner or something like that. We took their feedback, developed a new way to approach that helped them, but didn't negatively influence, say, a drive team and strategizing a match and have to totally rethink about how they go about a match, but we help our referees in making their lives easier. So really, at the end of the day, our goal is to make everybody's experience at a VEX event with the VEX games a little bit better, while also making any decision that doesn't negatively influence somebody else.
That makes sense. I think how you explain that, there's a lot of stakeholders, so you can't make a decision in a vacuum, right? You can't say this will really benefit the team without understanding the impact to coaches and to referees and to everybody else. So thank you for explaining that. That's really really enlightening.
Yeah, and one of the things that we take pride on the game design committee as well is we have members on the committee that represent each of these stakeholders, and with experience in each of these roles as a VEX competitor, whether that be former students, former coaches, a teacher, former event partners, things like that. We have so much experience on our game design committee that we truly do feel like when we make decisions like this, we're making an educated decision that will make a positive impact on our competitors and coaches, teachers, what have you.
That's really good insight, Bailey. Thank you.
Sure. Dan,
Yes.
guess what? Another one from Rowan. Are there any plans to supply Wi-Fi to the pits, even if there is a fee at future Worlds events?
Okay, that is a really good question, and I'm going to say generally the answer is no. But I don't want to limit ourselves. But generally, Wi-Fi is so critical for communications, and there's a lot of effort that goes on to make sure that there is no interference. So if we start introducing more Wi-Fi paths, the fear is that we could create interference. Now, maybe in a future VEX Robotics World Championship, the pits are in a different building and the practice fields are somewhere else. So I don't want to say a hard no, but at least for the next few years, I just don't see that as a possibility, and it's more for technical reasons than anything else.
All right, and another one here for you as well. This one's going to come from the coach of Team 46140A. The question is, for IQ, live scoring a match is bold and new, as well as risky and error-prone. Will the RECF be open to allow video replay becoming an option, and any discrepancies at regionals, states, or world championships, maybe, for example, finals matches only or something like that? The question's really asking, are we looking into video replay at all?
Boy, actually, that question is probably better asked of you. I will say from the REC Foundation perspective, again, we would never say never. A lot of thought went into the IQ game. I love that you said it's bold and new, because we really did attempt to be bold and new. And it'll be interesting what the feedback is at the end of the season. But I do think as far as it being risky and error prone, I know that the GDC really had a lot of iterations of the game to reduce the opportunities for risks and errors, right? But honestly, as much as Bailey and I are sitting here and projecting this level of confidence, even he and I don't know how the game will evolve over the course of a season. But generally, we want to avoid replays as much as possible because it puts a burden on our event partners and the referees that isn't part of our program, right? But I don't ever want to say ever either. But ultimately, that decision would not actually come down to me. It would actually come down to the GDC. So Bailey, maybe you have something to add to that.
Yeah, and again, reiterating, I loved how you prefaced the question with, our game was bold and new this year. That was definitely something we set out when we were designing this game. We wanted to take a bold leap, a new stance, and try to bring something new to the IQ game atmosphere. And I feel like we accomplished that. Live scoring, it's been a bit of a roller coaster this year. I think that's very easy to say so far. There's been some positive feedback, some negative feedback. When we have a change like that, I think that's to be expected. Specifically related to the question about instant replay and things like that after a match, we don't see that being something we look towards implementing into games in the near future. But again, like you said, we're of the same opinion. We can't ever say never. We can't predict what's going to happen in 10 years, but in the immediate future, that's not something we're going to be looking to implement into the rule set.
And I'll speak for Bailey and the GDC and all of the RECF. We do understand the desire for replay, right? We do understand that there are matches sometimes where the teams strongly feel that a bad call, ended their season, and we're not naive to that. But again, we have to look at the large ecosystem in general, and we'll never say never. But as I have said many, many times, it's not about winning the trophies. I don't want to diminish the fact that having a competitive robot and winning is important, but that's not what the goal of the REC Foundation is. It's not to find the best robots. So some of our decisions are based on that philosophy as well. The next question is really for both VEX Robotics and the REC Foundation. And it is from Connor, and he has asked, has the RECF ever considered attempts to diversify the robot designs? He says that there's an extreme presence of meta designs, and I'll ad-lib here as the season goes along. So I've been asked this question since 2017, and as many people in the community know, I come from a background in robotics, and I actually think the convergence of design is something that's quite normal in robotics. And if we had a very short season, we wouldn't see the convergence in design. But because we have almost a full calendar season, it's inevitable that the teams are looking on YouTube, they're seeing what other teams are producing, and they want to try those designs that they deem are most successful, right? So I do think it's natural that we see convergence of design, especially in the VEX IQ robotics program. Depending on the game, we don't see it as much in the VEX V5 competition, but you do see it. But I will say, back to one of the points I made earlier, is we are incentivizing, as part of design and excellence and innovation, is creative and innovative designs. So we really are making changes to the program that, at least for the first half of the season, we do expect to see a larger diversity of designs. It's something we're making a conscious effort to do. Bailey, your spin on that question?
Yeah, and I think your initial answer really resonated with me as well. Iteration is something that we push forward through both IQ and all the way up through V5 and the VEX U Robotics competition. It's integral to what VEX and the RECF are trying to create in our competitions. But you brought up a very good point with the long season. We can push iteration, but in the world that we live in now with social media, YouTube, TikTok, everyone wanting to talk about their designs, posting pictures and things like that, there's always going to be information for users to digest, to then turn around and say, how can I incorporate that idea or a similar idea into my robot? And from my perspective and from the GDC's perspective, that is engineering. Mm-hmm. That is a very integral part of the engineering design process, which is the research and integration of research into brainstorming. I think it's very important, but it's also very important in learning how to do that correctly and documenting your process correctly. So there's definitely a fine line, specifically related to the GDC. When we're looking at game design and things like that, we definitely look at how would that predictive meta evolve over the season, but we're also looking at things like, hey, what was the past year's game piece size? Would a mechanism from last year's robot be capable of manipulating this next year's game piece, or things like that? Something we also might look at is for the V5 robotics competition, because we range all the way from middle school through VEX U, we have a lot more history to look at with a game like that. So you might have a student that participated in a game in middle school, but still be participating in VEX as a university student. So we also look at that potential 8-year evolution of a game to see, are they getting something different, new every year? And we're really trying to influence that that design evolution of a game, that you're not just copying and pasting a robot design from previous years. That's probably the most important thing we do as a GDC to help influence that, for sure.
Yeah, and I think that Connor asked another question. He said when he was in high school, the school rejected the idea to start a VEX robotics team because it looked like an erector set, and he wanted to know what we can do to, make it our robotics programs better reflect the creativity. I think we've answered that. Actually, I think your answer to the previous question is perfect, is that, starting with the VEX robotics kit of parts doesn't diminish your engineering. In many ways, it enhances it. It's like, what can you build to meet that challenge with the parts that are available to you? That's almost a harder challenge than saying, hey, you have open source, you can 3D print or fabricate anything that you want. So I think it's actually quite an engineering challenge, the way that the REC Foundation and VEX Robotics programs are laid out. And I would also add to those programs that 3D printing is the most important thing to you, or advanced program. That is why we have the VEX Robotics AI competition, right? So so that allows you to do some of the things that you're talking about. But again, I challenge the community to remember that it's quite a challenge to come up with an effective robot design with the parts that are available. It's not easier, it's in some senses harder. The next question, I think, what's from Calder and 7447G?
Sure. This question's, like you said, comes in from Calder. Dan, this one, I think every person watching the video wants to know. Where will Worlds in 2026 be held? Are we ready to announce it yet?
I'm happy to announce it's going to be in... We're excited. We're on the final stretches of announcing our next host city, and it will be announced at the 2025 VEX Robotics World Championship.
You got to wait a little bit longer. We're sorry.
Entropy, he asked, are there going to be any major changes to the V5 system as a whole in the near future?
Sure. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to give you an answer that you're going to be able to write down and say, yes, I got this answer. It's something that VEX as a company is always looking at our feedback we're getting from customers. What can we do better? How can we improve our products? We have a long list of ideas that we're always keeping up with, future roadmap ideas, things like that. So there is that pie in the sky wish. What would we do if we did this differently? Things like that. Eventually, will we update it? Absolutely. When is that going to be? Unfortunately, I have no idea yet. So I'm not really going to be able to give you an answer that you're gonna love here yet, Entropy, but it will be coming eventually.
And I'll say from the REC Foundation perspective, we're very fortunate to have VEX Robotics as a partner. I think sometimes people look for the big changes, the big wow moments, but if you look at the number of new parts and sensors that VEX introduces every year, it's really, really exciting, and I think it keeps the designs fresh. So yes, I'm sure we're all anxious to hear what V6 may be, but don't overlook all the incremental improvements that VEX is constantly making.
Dan, I got a question for you. This one's going to come in from a head referee. His name's Charles. Charles asks, what is the end goal for VEX AI? Is it intended to be more of a classroom-based competition with robust mentoring to help the students through the challenge? Or is it meant to be more of like a top-tier, high-level team from V5 transitioning towards the AI competition?
That's an excellent question. And Charles, feel free to reach out to me directly, Dan_Mantz at recf.org on this one. But the simple answer is both. So from an REC Foundation perspective, we're very excited to add a more advanced competition to our offerings. I do think the coding challenge and the allowance of 3D printed parts for the VEX AI robotics competition does make it that higher end top tier. But VEX Robotics as a product company and the world's best education company, I do think it's also a classroom activity that really teaches the fundamentals of sensors and AI and data science. So maybe not the answer you're looking for, but I think depending on what your needs are, it's about AI education and bringing awareness to that technology that's so important. And from a competition perspective, we're very happy to have that high-end competition for our students.
I think you hit the nail on the head. That's exactly what we were looking at with what we were trying to do when we started working on the AI system here at VEX Robotics. We really wanted to be able to make a very challenging topic, which is artificial intelligence, easy to approach for anybody, but like you said, also give these high-level teams the opportunity to kind of expand beyond their comfort zone. I think both avenues are really important, and they're both really awesome characteristics that the AI program has.
Great.
Continuing on, here with Charles as well, advanced vision-based programming solutions are a way I think the program can continue to stay relevant for higher tier VRC and VEXU teams, especially with the introduction of the new V5 AI vision sensor with April tag support. I think this question is actually a little bit more for me than you. Are there any plans to introduce CV markers such as April tags into the field and/or field elements in the future? From the GDC's perspective, this is something we've been talking about specifically amongst ourselves, as well as through some of the other software engineers here at VEX Robotics who've been working with the AI vision sensor on what does the AI vision sensor do well, what is it kind of limited in, and how can we really maximize the capabilities of the sensor in its future. And I think moving forward, we can definitely expect to hopefully see game elements and games implement things like you're talking about, April tags, really emphasizing color selection when we're designing our games to make sure colors are easier to see from a computer vision perspective. So there's a lot more variables that we're introducing into game design when we start to think about things like this. So we're taking it step by step and being very methodical and slow about this come up. But it's definitely something we are looking forward to integrating into future games.
Yeah, that's was a really good question, and fundamentally sensors and learning to use sensors are really, really important for the future workforce. And I always used to joke with Bob and Tony, the co-founders, co-owners of Innovation First International Vex Robotics, that we need new sensors every 6 months. And I'm glad that you recognize that the vision sensors are a really good tool for our students to learn those concepts that they're going to need in the future workforce.
Absolutely. And then one more question here for you. This one comes in from Andy on team 15981A. Are there programs to help teams to get to Worlds if they cannot afford it?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it circles back to the beginning of this town hall. We are aware that not all teams can afford to come to the Vex Robotics World Championship. There's a couple avenues that the REC Foundation can help you with. First of all, there are some limited grants that will help with registration fees. But more importantly, the REC Foundation has written some library articles on fundraising. And the best person to answer those questions is actually reach out to your regional support manager, explain the situation that you're in, and we'll see if there's any opportunities for you to get some support for your attendance at the Vex Robotics World Championship. So, Bailey, Eli from 7567E has two really good questions. The first one is, why the decision to make a different AWP for work qualifying events specifically? Why not just change the criteria for all events? And his second question is, were you hoping that teams would already be climbing at this point in the season? So,
yeah, I'll knock off that second question real quick and easy. Yes, I was hoping we'd see some more climbs, but I understand why we haven't seen more climbs, and I'm following the strategic development of the game and the gameplay that's happening, and the organic development of the game is going really awesome. I've been really excited to see some of the more recent signature events and how the strategies have evolved from some of the early season events. And while we haven't seen that climbing that I yearn for, I am excited to see how the strategy has developed. The first question is a question that I'm really excited for, and I'm glad somebody asked this. Yeah. This is something that we as the GDC are super excited about, actually. It's something that we're really excited to integrate into the games, that AWP changing for Worlds qualifying events. One of the things that we as the GDC want to further emphasize and keep emphasizing throughout the next couple of seasons is autonomous, and having teams working and committing time to competitive and strategic autonomous modes and autonomous skills matches as well. We feel that if we're influencing that drive to keep making your autonomous programs better throughout the season, it's really going to emphasize that we want teams to be contributing points in autonomous, and we want robots to be able to move autonomously. We want teams to be competitive in the autonomous skills competition. And this is kind of one of the ways that we're trying to keep pushing that forward, is making autonomous more valuable later in the season. If it's more valuable later in the season, you're missing out if you're not participating. It's a competition after all, right? You want to score more points, but it's one of those things that by emphasizing it in the competition, we really want to emphasize that as part of our core educational foundations that we're trying to instill with the Vex Robotics competition.
Yeah, I mean, as we've talked about multiple times, the whole fundamental part of this program is the engineering design process, and I think it makes sense that as the competition level increases, why not incentivize the autonomous win point for that and challenge the students. I've seen in the old days of our program where they write their auton and they use the same auton through the entire season. Right. And I think this change will encourage some iteration in that. So I think I applaud the GDC for making that. I think we both understand the basis of the question, and I think it's a really good question. But if you look at bigger picture of trying to improve throughout the season, this is one way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the second part of the question, why not just change the criteria for all events? Again, that's something that it's super important to realize that we have a very wide range of competitive levels across the world. We have some of these events that may be run out of smaller classrooms with a really small amount of teams. Some of these league events that are, more, I guess we can call them mom and pop style competitions, right, Dan? But we also have these events that are sometimes being operated out of NFL football stadiums. So the level of competition is such a wide variety that we felt a big change like this would negatively impact some students at the local level before they got to that Worlds qualifying event. So we felt comfortable making the change for Worlds qualifying events, but at the local events, we felt like it might have been too much of a reach yet. You can look forward to maybe that changes in the future, in the next couple of years down the line, autonomous evolves more. But for now, this is what we're looking at.
Yeah, and to the community out there, we have something that we talk about at the REC Foundation and at Vex Robotics is that our program is a bell curve. A lot of times the emphasis is on the teams at the very high end of the bell curve, but at the end of the day, there are more students that are going to build a robot and compete once or twice, and that's going to be their experience than students that are traveling to 5 signature events and are trying to win a Vex Robotics World Championship. So at the REC Foundation, at the Vex Robotics GDC, we're trying to find a competition that supports all levels of students and coaching. So here's a really good question, and I know the community is going to love the answer. So Lucas from 70699A asked, will mobile goals be sold separately?
So I'm going to give some good news and some bad news with this answer. The bad news is not yet. The good news is, yes, they will be sold eventually. We're still in the process of getting those shipped to us in the US right now so we can redistribute those out. But yeah, we are going to be selling mobile goals individually for sale on the Vex Robotics website this year. But the thing I'm most excited about this question is that it gives us a chance to keep doing this in the future. So we'll be able to keep looking for game elements or field elements that will be in a little bit more of a higher demand year to year. So we're looking forward to potentially being able to provide the opportunity for individual sale of field elements like a mobile goal in future games as well. So that's something that we talked about on Vex Robotics side a lot, and we felt that we can start to provide those individual game elements for sale, and we're going to keep doing that in the future as well.
That's great news, Bailey, and I know Bob Mimlich was asked that question at Vex Worlds, and Tony Norman was asked that question at the Event Partners Summit, and they both were glad to hear that the community wanted that, and I'm glad to see that the Vex Engineering Group is following up. That's really good
absolutely.
News. So I think we're down to our last question.
Last question. This one comes in from Will on team 44252A. I think this might be the hardest question we've had so far. Dan, how much can you bench press?
Oh my goodness. I'm glad that you can tell that I'm a huge weightlifter. Back in my NFL days, I used to be able to squat 585 and I could do 250 for 25 reps. Wow. But then I moved on to the WWE,
okay.
and that same physique wasn't required. So at the WWE, I did still squat, but my bench pressing was, I could do more weight, like 300 pounds, but I did it at fewer repetitions.
Okay. You're maxing out.
I maxed out.
Yeah.
Then I went to the National Park Service, and my goal there was able to pull an elk from the backwoods. So I didn't really care about the weight. It was that ability to get that elk on the back and just get it through the woods and get it to safety. And then, now I'm at the REC Foundation. My strength isn't such a big deal anymore, but I do have that goal where, I'm lifting the portable fields.
Oh,
that's what I bench. So, you're an engineer for Vex Robotics, so maybe you can tell me what the weight of that. But every morning, I go for that jog, and then I go back to my garage, and I get one of those flex fields, and I lift that instead.
Well, at least you're not bench pressing the old metal fields.
Yeah, I tried to do that, but I needed to get back to my NFL physique for that. So, I'm a little bit older now, and Pat Mahomes asked me not to come back to the league, so I had to respect that decision. So
It's unfortunate, but we have to respect Pat's wishes.
yeah, and in a related question, Bailey, how many hot dogs can you eat at one setting?
Well, I'm no Kobayashi, but I think I'm probably able to get about 13 or 14 hot dogs in one sitting comfortably.
I think that might be fun to do at Vex Worlds. We should have a hot dog eating contest.
Hot dogs, donuts might be a fun contest too, but I think we could definitely have some fun with that one.
Very good. All right. Well, thank you to the community out there. Bailey and I both enjoy doing this. We know we weren't able to get all the questions that were asked. And for many of you, maybe you didn't hear your question, but you heard one that was similar. It's really important for us to be in front of the community, let you know that we're listening. These decisions we make aren't always easy. There's a lot of factors that go into it, but we're committed, both at Vex Robotics and the REC Foundation, to be as transparent as possible and to continue to do this. So again, from the GDC perspective, they will be continuing to do game manual updates throughout the season. And from the REC Foundation perspective, we'll be continuing to make tweaks to the how we run a competition, how volunteers can contribute, and how we can reward those teams that are coming up with innovative and creative designs. So, Bailey, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, Dan, and everybody, I think I can speak for Dan and myself when I say we are so excited to see you in May.
That's all for this town hall. As always, keep an eye out for any further season updates on recf.org and vex.com.
We're so excited to see you all at future events and in Dallas for Vex Worlds 2025. See you there.